Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, you sent over some excerpts about Teroldego, an Italian red wine grape.
Oh, Teroldego.
And I have to say, the fact that our source material is all in Portuguese, it adds a whole other level of intrigue, don't you think?
Definitely. It's like we're cracking a code before we even get started.
Exactly. So to get everyone up to speed, it looks like what we have here is sort of like a structured dossier, right?
Yeah.
With an index leading us to different sections about Teroldego. Everything from its history and what makes this grape unique to, how it's grown, how it's made into wine, even tasting notes and thoughts about the future of Teroldego.
That's right.
So where do we even begin with something like this?
Well, the history of Teroldego is a good place to start. And even its name, it has mysterious origins. One theory is it comes from Tiroler gold, meaning gold of Tyrol in German.
Okay, gold of Tyrol. That's a pretty dramatic name for a grape. Is there some literal connection to gold, or is this name about something else?
It's about the wine itself. In the medieval times, Teroldego wines supposedly had this golden hue, pretty unexpected for a red wine.
Golden red wine. Okay, I'm intrigued. It almost sounds like a white wine, but red. I'm trying to picture what that would even look like.
Right. This golden color suggests they were making it quite differently back then compared to how it's made now.
I'm already dying to know what the modern version tastes like, but hold on, before we get ahead of ourselves. What else does our source tell us about Teroldego's past?
Well, it says that in the 12th century, it was a favorite of the prince bishops of Trento.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we're talking about a grape with a serious history.
Definitely. And it wasn't just local nobility either. Our source mentions that it was even enjoyed in the imperial court of Vienna.
So this grape was hanging out with the elite, but then things take a bit of a dark turn, right? Because in the 19th century, Teroldego almost completely disappeared.
Yeah, almost. Disease and pests, especially one called phylloxera, almost wiped it out entirely.
Phylloxera. That's a name that sends chills down any wine lover's spine. I mean, it devastated so many vineyards across Europe.
It did. But Teroldego was especially vulnerable. It was primarily grown in its native Trentino. And because of that, there wasn't a lot of genetic diversity among the vines.
So, kind of like if everyone has the same immune system and one person gets sick, everyone gets sick.
Exactly. And that's what happened with Teroldego and phylloxera. A lack of diversity made it a sitting duck.
It's like a reminder that diversity isn't just important for people, it's important for grapes too. But clearly, Teroldego survived somehow. How did it manage to make a comeback?
Dedicated producers, basically. They refused to let this grape disappear. They grafted European vines, including Teroldego, onto American rootstock, which had a natural resistance to phylloxera.
Oh, okay, so American rootstock to the rescue. But it sounds like it must have been an incredibly difficult and time-consuming process.
Oh, for sure. It involved, well, grafting each vine one by one. But it was worth it in the end.
Huh.
It saved Teroldego and many other European grape varieties, too.
It's a good thing they did, because now we get to explore what makes this grape so special. So let's move on from its dramatic past to its personality, so to speak. What can we expect in terms of, its taste, its aroma, all those things that make a wine unique?
Well, first, let's talk about the color. Those medieval wines we talked about, those golden wines. Today, Teroldego is known for a very different color. It's an intense ruby red. Like imagine the deepest red of a pomegranate.
That's more like it. Now we're talking.
Yeah.
But what about, the actual taste? What kind of flavors and aromas can someone expect?
Lots of red and black fruits. Think cherry, raspberry, blackberry. And then you get some blueberry, even plum.
Wow, so a real berry explosion.
Yeah. And then things get even more interesting. You get hints of black pepper, clove, and cinnamon.
Wait, so like a spice rack fell into a bowl of berries?
Exactly. It's a really captivating combination.
This is making me thirsty. But I know we talked about tannins earlier, so it's not all just sunshine and berries, right?
Yep. Right. Teroldego is known for its fum tannins, which give the wine structure and make it age incredibly well.
Okay, so a wine for the cellar. What happens to those flavors as it ages? Do they just intensify or does something else happen?
Oh, they get even more interesting. Like those fruit and spice notes kind of melt together.
Yeah.
And then you start to get hints of leather, tobacco, even more pronounced spice. It evolves.
So it's like the wine tells a story that unfolds as it gets older. I like that. But we can't talk about wine without talking about terroir, right?
Of course not.
So where does Teroldego truly thrive?
The Piano Italiano region in Trentino, it's got the ideal climate and these unique alluvial soils.
Alluvial soils. Remind me what makes them so special.
Picture a river carrying all this rich sediment and depositing it over time. That's alluvial soil, full of minerals.
Oh, right. So the vines are basically getting a mineral boost right from the start.
Yeah, exactly. And the climate. Well, Trentino's got warm, sunny days, perfect for ripening grapes, but then cool nights to preserve the acidity.
So it's like the perfect balance, naturally. But within that balance, does the actual type of soil make a difference in how the wine tastes?
Absolutely. Clay soils tend to give you a fuller-bodied Teroldego with, like, stronger tannins. Sandy soils, on the other hand, make for more elegant, lighter-bodied expressions.
Okay, so clay for a bold wine, sandy for something a little more delicate. I'm taking notes. But we can't forget about the human element here. How do winemakers actually take these grapes and transform them into the delicious wine we enjoy?
Well, it all starts with the harvest, usually in late September, early October. Then the grapes are, destemmed and crushed.
Standard procedure so far. But I know Teroldego can have those big, bold tannins. So are there special techniques used to make sure the wine isn't like too harsh?
Yes, maceration. That's where the juice spends time with the grape skins.
And the longer it sits, the more tannins get extracted.
Exactly. A longer maceration makes a more intense, age-worthy Teroldego.
Got it. And what about a lighter style?
A shorter maceration, or something called carbonic maceration, that's where they ferment the whole grapes in a carbon dioxide-rich environment. Emphasizes the fruitiness.
So there's a whole range of styles to play with. I like it. Okay, so we've got crushed grapes, maceration is done. What's next?
Fermentation, which is, happening throughout the whole process, that's where yeast converts the sugar into alcohol. With Teroldego, this usually happens in stainless steel tanks.
Makes sense. Modern approach. More control. But am I sensing some oak in our future?
Ha ha ha, you read my mind. Oak aging is very common for Teroldego. Adds another layer of complexity to the wine.
Okay, let's break it down. What are the typical types of oak used, and how do they each affect the flavor?
You usually see French, American, and European oak. French oak is more subtle, delicate spice and cannons. American oak is, well, more bold, vanilla, coconut, sometimes even dill. European oak is somewhere in between.
It's like choosing the perfect spices for the wine. And for how long is Teroldego typically aged in oak?
It varies. A few months for a younger, fruitier style. A year or more for those complex, age-worthy wines.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've covered how it's made, the oak, the tannins. But now I want to know, what does it actually feel like to drink this wine? Paint me a picture.
All right, so imagine that beautiful ruby red in your glass. Swirl it, and you get hit with those vibrant red and black fruits we talked about.
Okay, I'm picturing it. What's next?
And then those spice notes start to emerge. Black pepper, clove, cinnamon, sometimes even a hint of licorice.
My mouth is watering, and on the palate, how does it all come together?
The fruit and spice are still there, but now you get the texture. Those tannins give it structure and a pleasant grip, and then the acidity keeps it balanced and fresh. It's a full-bodied wine.
Okay, so we're not talking about a light and breezy wine here. It's got substance. This is a wine that demands food, right?
Absolutely. Teroldego loves bold flavors. Classic Italian cuisine is the perfect pairing.
Perfect, because I was hoping you'd say that. Give me some specifics. What kind of dishes should we be pairing with Teroldego?
Think hearty meats, grilled steak, roast lamb, even game meats like venison.
Okay, those tannins will definitely cut through all that richness. But what if I'm not feeling meat? Are there other options?
Of course, rich pasta dishes are great too. Ragu, mushroom sauces, even lasagna.
Yum. Okay, now I'm really getting hungry. And cheese. Surely Teroldego would be a perfect match for strong cheeses, right?
You're spot on. Aged cheeses, especially those with a bit of sharpness, are fantastic. Parmesan, Pecorino, even Gorgonzola if you like blue cheese.
So basically, anything with bold, savory flavors is going to be a friend to Teroldego. I love it.
Exactly. It's a wine that doesn't shy away from a challenge.
I like that. And I love that we're thinking about the whole experience of enjoying this wine. It's not just about what's in the glass. It's about the food, the company, the whole ambiance.
Absolutely. Wine is meant to be shared and enjoyed with food that complements its flavors and aromas. Speaking of which, we've been talking a lot about Trentino, but this source also mentions Teroldego popping up in other parts of Italy.
Oh, really? Okay, I'm all ears. Where else can we find it?
Well, it's grown, though, in smaller quantities in regions like Veneto, Lombardy, even Tuscany, often used in blends to add depth and structure.
So even if it's not the star of the show, it's still making its presence known. And I bet it's starting to make its way outside of Italy as well, right?
It is. There are a few producers in California and Australia experimenting with it.
It really makes you wonder what the future holds for this grape. Will it remain a hidden gem for those in the know? Or will it explode onto the world stage?
That's the big question.
Ah,
But our source does give us a few clues about what's coming next. It seems like sustainability is becoming a big focus for Teroldego producers.
that's great to hear. What kind of sustainable practices are we talking about?
Lots of organic and biodynamic farming, really focusing on soil health and biodiversity.
So they're taking a really holistic approach. I like that.
Yeah, and it's producing some really exceptional wines. Unfortunately, we're out of time for this part of our deep dive.
I know. But don't worry, everyone. We'll be back to continue our exploration of Teroldego in part 2.
Welcome back to our Teroldego deep dive. I hope everyone is ready for more because we've only just started exploring this amazing grape.
That's right. In part 1, we talked about Teroldego's mysterious origins and that dramatic near extinction in the 19th century.
Yeah, it's a pretty incredible story of survival.
It really is. And speaking of that near extinction, I'm curious to dig a little deeper into what actually caused it. I mean, our source mentions disease and pests, but what were the main culprits?
Well, the biggest threat was phylloxera, this tiny little insect like, an aphid.
Well, phylloxera,
Yeah,
the name every winemaker dreads. I remember reading about it, how it just wreaked havoc on vineyards all over Europe.
it did. And Teroldego was hit particularly hard. You see, back then, it was mostly grown in its native Trentino.
Right.
And because of that, there wasn't much genetic diversity among the vines.
So, like we talked about before, if everyone has the same immune system and one person gets sick, everyone gets sick.
Exactly. And that's what happened with Teroldego and phylloxera. One vine was susceptible, they were all susceptible.
So it's like a lesson in natural balance, but applied to winemaking.
Yeah.
Diversity equals resilience. But how did they finally overcome this phylloxera crisis? I mean, clearly we're still enjoying Teroldego today.
Right. Well, the solution was to graft European vines, including Teroldego, onto American rootstock, which had developed a natural resistance to phylloxera.
Oh, so American rootstock to the rescue again. But it sounds like that must have been a massively time-consuming process.
It was. I mean, they had to graft each vine individually, but it saved so many European varieties from disappearing completely.
It's amazing to think that without that intervention, we might not have Teroldego today. But I'm curious, did this near-extinction experience change the way Teroldego is grown today?
You bet. Nowadays, there's a much bigger focus on sustainability in vineyard management. Things like choosing the right clones that are better adapted to the climate and more resistant to diseases.
So they're using the lessons of the past to protect the future of this grape. I love that. But I think it's time to move from the serious stuff to the fun stuff, right?
Let's do it.
We've talked about the history, the terroir, but now I want to know more about the different styles of Teroldego that are out there.
Yeah, because like any grape, Teroldego can be made into a variety of styles.
Hmm.
From light and fruity to rich and age-worthy.
Exactly. So what does that spectrum look like for Teroldego?
Well, on one side, you have those light and fruity wines. Those are often made using carbonic maceration,
Right.
which is a process where you ferment the whole grapes in a carbon dioxide-rich environment. And the result is a wine that's super bright, very fresh, and easy to drink.
So those are the wines for a summer picnic or a light lunch.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Perfect for those occasions. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have those bolder, more structured wines that are built for aging.
Okay, so the serious wines. What makes them different?
These wines often have longer maceration periods. They might also be aged in oak.
Right.
And the result is a wine with more concentrated fruit, powerful tannins, and layers of spice, earth, and tobacco that develop over time.
So those are the wines you pull out for a special occasion, a fancy dinner, celebration.
Exactly. But there's also a whole range in between those two extremes.
Of course. I mean, not every Teroldego has to be at one extreme or the other.
Right. There are some that are medium-bodied with balanced tannins and fruit, maybe aged in a combination of oak and stainless steel.
So something for every taste and occasion. But okay, let's say I'm standing in a wine shop. How can I tell what style of Teroldego is in the bottle?
Well, the first thing to look at is the region. We've talked about Teroldego Rotelliano from Trentino. That's generally considered the most classic expression of this grape.
Okay, so Teroldego Rotelliano on the label means we're getting the authentic stuff.
Yeah. And you can also look for mentions of specific vineyards or subzones within Trentino. Those can tell you something about the terroir and the potential style.
It's like a secret code for wine lovers. Anything else we should look for?
The vintage is important too. A younger vintage might be more fruit-forward, while an older one could be more developed and complex.
Got it. So the vintage gives us a clue about how the wine has aged. Any other tips?
A lot of labels include tasting notes or descriptions on the back. Those can be really helpful.
Oh, I love reading those descriptions. They give you a little peek into the winemaker's mind. Okay, so we've covered a lot about Teroldego. Its history, terroir, different styles, even how to decode the label. But I know we've got more to explore.
We do. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll talk about the trends shaping the future of Teroldego.
And we're back for the grand finale of our Teroldego exploration. I have to say, I'm really excited to see where this journey takes us. In parts 1 and 2, we covered a lot of ground. The history, the terroir, the different styles. But now I'm curious about what the future holds for this grape.
Me too. And it looks like there are a lot of exciting things happening. Remember how we talked about the growing trend of sustainability in Teroldego vineyards?
Yes. And you mentioned that it's becoming a favorite for natural winemakers, right?
Exactly.
But why Teroldego? I mean, what makes it such a good fit for that style of winemaking?
Well, Teroldego, it's got those naturally high tannins and acidity,
Yeah.
and that makes it really well suited to that hands-off approach that natural winemakers love.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't really need a lot of intervention to produce a balanced and age-worthy wine.
Right. It kind of like thrives on its own.
So it's almost like the less you do to it, the better it is.
In a way, yeah. The idea is that you let the grape express itself, and the terroir too.
I like that. So what kinds of things are these natural winemakers doing with Teroldego? I mean, are we talking, wild yeasts, no oak, all that stuff?
A lot of them are using indigenous yeasts, yep.
Mhm.
The yeasts that are naturally found on the grape skins and in the winery.
It makes sense. I mean, those yeasts are like a reflection of that specific place.
Yeah, exactly. Adds another layer of complexity. And a lot of natural winemakers are also moving away from traditional oak aging. They're using more neutral vessels like stainless steel or concrete.
So if I'm looking for a Teroldego that's all about like the pure fruit and the terroir, natural wine might be the way to go.
It could be, yeah.
But natural wine isn't the only trend, right? We're also seeing a lot of focus on sustainability in the vineyards themselves.
Right, we talked about that before.
But remind me, what kinds of practices are they using?
Organic and biodynamic farming are becoming very popular, really focusing on soil health, biodiversity, minimizing chemical inputs.
It's like they're creating a whole ecosystem in the vineyard, and that must have a positive impact on the wine.
Yeah, definitely. Healthier vines, better grapes, better wine. It all comes full circle.
I'm all for that. But with all this attention to detail and sustainability, do you think that will affect the price of Teroldego? Will it become, too expensive for the average wine lover?
It's a valid question. I mean, these practices can be more costly.
Yeah.
But there are also a lot of producers who are committed to making these wines more accessible.
That's good to hear. How are they doing that?
Some are using more affordable packaging. Some are selling directly to consumers to cut out the middleman. So there are options.
That's great. So, last question. Do you think Teroldego has what it takes to become like the next big thing in wine?
That's a tough one. It's got so much going for it. Unique flavors, great with food, perfect for sustainable winemaking, but it's still a relatively unknown grape.
A part of me wants it to stay that way, like a secret we share with only a few people.
I get that. But it's also exciting to see a grape with so much potential getting more attention.
True. I just want these amazing producers to get the recognition they deserve and for more people to discover this incredible wine.
Me too. And who knows, maybe it'll become the next big thing. Or maybe it'll just continue to be a hidden gem. Either way, it's a win for Teroldego lovers.
I think you're right. It's a grape with an amazing story, delicious flavors, and a bright future. What more could you ask for? Well, listeners, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the world of Teroldego. We hope you've enjoyed this exploration as much as we have. And if you haven't tried Teroldego yet, we highly recommend seeking out a bottle and giving it a taste. You won't be disappointed.
Cheers to that. And remember, there's a whole world of wine out there waiting to be discovered. So keep exploring, keep tasting, and keep those questions coming. Until next time, happy sipping.